What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for Batwoman Season 1, Episode 4, titled Who Are You? The same title as Season 5, Episode 10 of Arrow, so that is pretty interesting. Now, for these reviews for the Arrowverse shows, I go over the Crisis stuff first. However, for Batwoman, there has been absolutely none of it. Supergirl has a little, Flash has a lot, Arrow is basically all about the Crisis, but Batwoman has absolutely nothing. However, instead of the Crisis setup, there is the Batman stuff, confirmation of Batman characters, even showing Batman in the first episode, and in episode 3 we learned about Robin, and he was mentioned for the first time. Now in this episode, it's not as significant, but there is actually a new Batman villain, a pretty iconic Batman villain at that, who has been confirmed to exist in the Arrowverse and probably went up against Batman in the past, and that's Killer Croc. Kate very casually mentioned Killer Croc in the first scene of this episode, confirming that he was most likely a villain who Batman went up against in the past. I'm guessing, considering the world didn't know about powers until the Flash or the metahumans came around, it's probable that Batman went up against Killer Croc for the first time ever in 2014 or 2015, as he did leave in 2015. That definitely fits within my timeline. If you want to check out that video, link will be in the top right corner of this one. But I think even though Killer Croc is nowhere near the best Batman villain, he's not anywhere near my favorite. It is still pretty cool for him to have been confirmed to exist in the Arrowverse, and I'm sure if he ever appears, he could definitely be similar to King Shark on The Flash. I think the show has a smaller budget, so it probably wouldn't look as good, but I do think that the Arrowverse shows, especially The Flash, can pull off a character like Killer Croc. Either way, I think it's really cool that they confirmed his existence, and that's, I think, the most interesting thing about this show. Whenever they confirm anything about Batman, they talk about Batman, confirming certain characters about Batman, and even Batman villains. I think that's the best part about the show, which doesn't really say much about the rest of it. So in that scene where Kate very casually mentions Killer Croc, Kate is actually in bed with Reagan, and we see a storyline in this episode where they're dating, but every single time they're together, Kate has to leave. They're together for like a minute every single time. This happens like 4 times in the episode, and every single time Kate has to leave because she's Batwoman, and I think this was a little ham-fisted. It was a little obvious and very repetitive how many times it happened, but also how obvious it was. Literally, they got together a minute later every single time Kate had to leave. And by the 3rd and 4th time, which I'm pretty sure it literally happened 4 times in this episode, it was pretty annoying, and it got a little repetitive. I actually do like Reagan. I think she could be an interesting love interest for Kate, but it doesn't seem like she's going to be sticking around after this episode, and if she does, then it's probably not going to be in a love interest role, or if it is, then it's going to be a while until they get back together. Either way, I don't really like the storyline. So after Kate leaves Reagan for the first time, she goes to Wayne Tower, and then the storyline with Martha's pearls begin. This is interesting. Martha's pearls are very integral to the Wayne's deaths, like literally every single time, at least lately that we've seen their deaths. It always ends with Joe Chill shooting Martha, but at the same time also taking her pearls. They typically fall apart, but he runs away with a couple of them. In this universe, it doesn't seem like they were destroyed, but if they were put back together, but Bruce did manage to get them all together, which I thought was interesting. I didn't mind that at all. It does have some mentions of Bruce Wayne here and Batman, and that, like I said earlier, is always the best part of this episode, and the mentions of the Wayne's deaths and the focus on that aspect of what happened all those years ago, I think that was definitely more interesting than the usual in this episode. So then we get the beginning of the Katherine Hamilton storyline, which also includes Alice and Jacob Kane. This is the only part of the episode that's any way connected to the main storyline of the season, as well as the main villain, as the whole storyline with Kate is basically 100% filler. Anyway, in this storyline, Katherine meets up with Alice, who blackmail her because it turns out Katherine convinced Jacob and Kate that Beth had died by placing the bone fragments there. I think this actual storyline is fine, and I think that when she actually told Jacob, it's not a bad scene at all. Also, this storyline has some brutal moments with Katherine sending some people to, I think it was like assassinate or do something to Alice, and then Alice stops them and cuts off one of their fingers. It's pretty brutal, and I didn't expect them to go that far with actually showing what happened with the finger. It almost showed it actually being cut off, and so all of that was actually pretty good. However, I really hope it doesn't go where I expect it's going with Katherine herself. Now, like I said, the storyline is fine, and Jacob's reaction to what Katherine did is also pretty good. However, I feel like where the storyline is going will probably not end where it should. I feel like the drama between Jacob and Katherine, or it's really more than drama, it should be more than drama. I feel like it will subside in a couple episodes, and Jacob will forgive her, even though what she did is unforgivable, it's reprehensible, it's borderline evil, and she should never be shown in a good light here. She should never be given a redemption, because what she did was terrible, and even though the show just started, they're already giving her this storyline, and I don't think she's going anywhere, so the show is inevitably going to give her some sort of redemption if she doesn't become a full-on villain, and that's just something they should never do, because again, what she did 15 years ago when she put the fragments of the bone there to convince Jacob and Kate that Beth had died, basically forcing them to abandon her, even though they didn't know that she was dead, was legitimately unforgivable, reprehensible, and like I said, borderline evil. So the storyline's fine, but I really hope they don't redeem Katherine in any way, because I don't think she's redeemable. In the storyline with Kate that focuses on Martha's pearls, also Luke's in the storyline as well, and also Reagan. Anyway, there's a villain in the storyline, and that's Magpie, a villain who I thought, first of all, her design was really over the top, really weird looking, really, really campy, and also that's practically the same thing with the character as well. Very campy, very over the top, and not exactly a character or a villain that I would call a good villain at all. And in fact, I would say the exact opposite. She was not a very good villain at all. The fight scenes also between Batwoman and Magpie were not exactly great. There was one part in actually the beginning, before the fight scenes, but when Magpie was stealing Martha's pearls, or whatever she's doing at the beginning, anyway, there was a scene where she threw some bombs at the guard, and the explosions, and also where she threw her Bertarang, or whatever you want to call it later, they looked so CGI looking, they looked really, really faked. That, on top of how over the top and campy the villain is, makes for a pretty hard to watch episode at times. Now, one thing I did like about this storyline, because I didn't really like much of it, it was filler, it wasn't exactly good, the villain was bad, but one part of it that I did like was Batwoman herself, focusing on how much of a rookie hero she is. Not only did she just begin her career, but she didn't have as much training or experience as characters like Oliver Queen or Bruce Wayne, people who are also powerless vigilantes, who are, at least for a while, were the sole vigilantes in their city. Batwoman, who isn't as experienced and also just began her career, would be a rookie hero at this point, so I'm glad that they focused on that and made for some pretty interesting scenes, and also made her a less one-dimensional character. Definitely made her more, flawed as a human being in this episode, or even as a vigilante, and that's something that I did like. The final showdown between Batwoman and Magpie was fine, not good, and nothing to write home about, but it wasn't bad, it was just fine. And one of the things to mention is Elseworlds, as it was clear from a shot from the last episode that was the episode before Elseworlds that took place during Elseworlds Part 1, meaning this episode will be after it. However, there's been no mention of Elseworlds at all. The Arkham Breakout, the fact that Green Arrow, the Flash, and Supergirl all came to Gotham City in like a couple days ago, none of that was mentioned or even acknowledged, and contrary to the fact that it seemed like episode 3 was before Elseworlds, the showrunner said that by this episode we're caught up to Elseworlds, so I'm guessing in episode 5 they're going to mention Elseworlds, to mention all those things that happened, and I really hope they do, to tie it into the Arrowverse, to give it some sort of continuity, and because the events that happened in Elseworlds in Part 2, it would make no sense for them to not at least mention it a little bit in the next episode. In conclusion, this episode was fine. Honestly, it might have been the worst episode of the show so far, as other than the Katherine and Hamilton storyline, which even then, it wasn't a storyline that I loved, and I really don't think it's going to go anywhere good. This episode was practically filler. Batwoman was a better character in this episode than typically. However, the villain was bad. It was very over the top. It wasn't exactly very good looking, and other than Killer Croc being confirmed, nothing happened in this episode of interest, and I think this honestly was the worst episode so far, and I'd give it a 5.7 out of 10. So anyway, let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.